when we define publishing. What is publishing? Is publishing sending an email to 100 of your friends? Is publishing being in a listserv group? Is publishing telling 10 people something, knowing that one of them is going to go on a talk radio show or a television show? What is the changing nature of publishing? We also want to look at whether people learn more or less and remember more or less when they read something off a computer screen instead of out of a book. And we need to explore, of course, the implications of a new world where people search only for the news and information that particularly interests them. What happens in a democracy when we don't share common news experiences and we all have our own little niches of information, and when we have indeed haves and have-nots of information, and when we no longer see something all in common, or when we no longer see something because an editor is so slavishly the tool of focus groups and market research that the editor decides this is not what you want. Now, a lot of the great stories, a lot of the great pieces of journalism in all of our histories are stories that we didn't know we wanted until someone published them. You know, there weren't a lot of us who were sitting around saying, gee, I wonder if we're massacring babies at My Lai. I mean, that's not something you would get up in the morning and search for on your computer in 1971 if you'd had one. There aren't a lot of us who were sitting around saying, I wonder, you know, gee, tell me more about that burglary at the Watergate. I mean, some great journalism happens because reporters are enterprising and editors take chances and they put something out there that people see. If all of us just simply search for the news we know we want, where does that stuff go? What's the market for that? So those are issues. Another kind of issue that's in the last couple of weeks has just sort of hit us all in the face, and that is in this new information age where you have constant news cycles and constant television talk news, how do we wage war? If everything demands an instant response and if the attention span of the country is so brief, can we really have a war that takes more than a couple of weeks? Now, I say that not knowing enough or having enough of an opinion about the bona fides of this war, but I think that's a question. Another issue is how do we buy and sell stock? The securities laws are set up so that there is a kind of hierarchy in the way we all get information about stocks based on at least the regulator's perception of how qualified we are to receive and digest and act on this information. Well, the internet turns all that upside down. You have people going online in chat rooms touting stock. You have IPOs being done in auctions online. Those are big questions. I don't know the answers, but I know that this magazine ought to cover it. So you can see that we have lots of work to do. Now, finally, I should also note that in our quest to hold the media accountable, the way they hold everybody else accountable, we've tried and I think succeeded in gaining some attention for the way we are holding ourselves accountable. We've appointed an ombudsman at our magazine, Bill Kovich, who used to run the New York Times Washington Bureau and then was the editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Bill is a legendary editor, and he now runs the Nieman Foundation, which is a journalism foundation up at Harvard. Now, our arrangement with Bill is real simple. He has a no-cut contract for the next 2 years. When someone complains about anything in our magazine, I investigate it on my own, but on a total, and I hope I handle it candidly and aggressively, but on a totally separate track, Bill gets that complaint and investigates it on his own, and if need be, with staff assistance that we provide him. In every issue of the magazine, he can write whatever he wants about any complaint far forward in the front pages of the magazine at any length that he chooses. He can say anything he wants. Now, that's our way of putting our principles of accountability on the line, and I've got to tell you that our readers really appreciate it. Sometimes it's embarrassing to us, but it's a good kind of embarrassment. Now, of course, many in the press don't appreciate what we're doing. One of the things that continues to bother me in that regard is the way they keep calling us a media watchdog. That's the shorthand for this magazine. Now, is the Wall Street Journal a financial watchdog? Well, it kind of is, but that's part, but hardly all, that it does. Is any local newspaper a civic watchdog? Well, that's part of what it does, but that's not all that it does. It also provides all kinds of information and all kinds of other information service to a community. I have to tell you that I think the fact that they keep calling us a watchdog, and just a watchdog, really, to be blunt about it, stems from the fact that they're shocked that anyone is watching them at all. Just as I must say that lawyers incessantly called the American lawyer a scandal sheet at the beginning, because part of what we did was watch lawyers in a way they'd never been watched before, and sometimes we found some scandalous stuff. Now, what are the consequences of what we're doing? I'll just try to outline this in a minute and then I'll close. I think ultimately that if we succeed, we will create or recreate a marketplace of ideas where quality really counts. If we succeed, I really think we can do that kind of service. Now, look at the current irony. We can all agree, everyone in this room, that there's an oversupply of content. Too many television shows, too many websites, too many magazines, too many newsletters, too much of everything else for all of us to choose from. There's just too much stuff out there. We can't make our way through it all. It's information overload, and that's obvious. Yet, in any other market where there's an oversupply of something, part of what happens is that quality improves. But all of us in this room can also agree that the quality of our content, or at least the content seen by most people, by and large keeps sinking down to yet a new lowest common denominator. The sinking quality of our media is indeed as much a cliche as information overload. Now, how can that be? How can we have too much of something in a competitive marketplace, yet declining quality? Perhaps it's because no one is undertaking a consistent measurement of quality. No one is giving consumers any guideposts from which to make choices. And that, I submit, is where we hope to play a role. We hope to become perhaps one of many of the entities that ultimately help to separate the good from the bad by making quality distinctions. So our message to our readers and to our prospective readers is now simple, and people are getting it. In this complicated, complex information age, when standards range from the best to the worst, you need to know your sources. Know your sources. That's our tagline. That defines what we do. We help the world, I hope, to know its sources. Now, to be sure, we're also well on the way to adding some online and television components to what we do that'll be part of the magazine, and you'll probably be hearing and reading about some of that stuff in the weeks and months ahead. But again, I want to emphasize that all of these offshoots will be based on the brand name that we intend to build with this magazine for helping people know their sources. And we expect to make lots of mistakes along the way, and we expect that the rest of the press won't be shy about telling the world about those mistakes. Indeed, we never expected to build this enterprise on the kindness of those we are writing about. Not everyone is a Dick Pogue. But ultimately, and in some quarters even now, we will be seen as the best thing that ever happened to good, honest, accountable journalism. And to the majority of journalists who are good and honest and accountable. Because we're going to be the best thing that can happen for journalists who I think, and I really believe, chose that profession because they share exactly the values that I've been talking about. Thank you for listening.
Today at the City Club of Cleveland, we are listening to Mr. Stephen Brill, Chairman and Editor-in-Chief of Brill's Content Magazine. We'll return to Steve in just a few moments, but first a few City Club announcements. The Cleveland City Club's Friday Forum is the longest continuously running free speech forum in the country. Our greetings today go to all of you in the room, as well as those watching on WVIZ TV 25 and Cablevision, and those listening to WCLV 95.5 and the more than 400 other radio stations in the City Club's broadcast network. That network is generously sponsored by Eaton Corporation. Information about the City Club is now available on the internet. There are 3 ways to reach us. Our home page is cityclub.org, or you can also find us on cleveland.com or wclv.com. And Jim Foster, our executive director, tells me that in this last month we received well over 2,000 hits. So someone out there is listening to us. At next week's Friday Forum, May 7, the City Club will present Professor Veljko Vujicic from Oberlin College. Professor Vujicic, whose father was a diplomat from Montenegro and whose mother is Serbian, has studied the Yugoslavian region while he has served on the faculties at Berkeley, Harvard, and Oberlin. And his talk will be entitled Serbia, Kosovo, and the West, Mistakes, Misconceptions, and Consequences. And then the following week, on May 14, Professor Henry Louis Gates, Jr. of Harvard will present his fascinating multimedia anthology entitled Encarta Africana. Today's forum is the first presentation of a new annual City Club forum in memory of Cyrus Eaton. This is endowed by a very generous gift to the Forum Foundation by the Cyrus Eaton Foundation. Mr. Eaton was a truly unique Cleveland businessman who spoke at the City Club on 3 occasions. With us today at our head table are Cyrus Eaton's granddaughter and her husband, Lissy and Hank Gulick. Would the 2 of you please rise and receive our recognition? Thank you. Also, we're very pleased that today's forum has received additional sponsorship from the law firm of Thompson, Hein and Flory. This year, Thompson, Hein and Flory has sponsored 3 forums at the City Club, and we're extremely pleased with this partnership. We welcome our guests from this very outstanding Cleveland-based law firm, and with us today at the head table are 2 partners in the firm, Keith Ashmus and Tom Zich. Would you please rise and be recognized? We greatly appreciate your support. Each week during the school year, the City Club invites high school students to attend the forum and in most cases meet with the speaker after the forum. This City Club youth program is supported by a generous grant from the Jeffrey David Epstein Memorial Foundation. And today we welcome students from Avon Lake, Cuyahoga Heights, Magnificat, Riverside, and South High schools. This is the final week for this year's student program, and we'd like to thank our special volunteer, Joe Burke, who coordinates and operates this program. Would Joe Burke and our student guests please stand and be recognized? Thank you. Joe does a terrific job. Now we'd like to return to Mr. Brill. He will take on the podium for our traditional City Club question and answer period. We welcome questions from anyone here in the room. Any guest is welcome to ask questions. Nan Alexander holds the microphone here in the front, and Susan Buchwald is our guest microphone holder in the back. May we have the first question, please?
This morning's paper, both the New York Times and the Cleveland Plain Dealer, talked about how our bombing is helping Yugoslavia and President Milosevic. What is the source of such a news? Because, as I know, in a dictatorship, it is very difficult to express your opinion, and whether the troops or the citizens of Yugoslavia like or don't like our bombing certainly will not appear in an American press truthfully, because citizens will get killed if they give the truth. It's negative to Milosevic. Could you please comment on that?
Yeah, I read the story that you're referring to in the Times, and I must say, the same question about the sources there. Now,